Northern Ireland, almost 10% of the entire population has red hair.
I'm not a witch.
Ireland is famous for fiery red hair, freckled skin, and pale blue eyes. But what if I told you there's another Irish face, just as real, but far less talked about? Jet black hair, piercing light eyes, and skin so fair it almost glows. For centuries, people have whispered about them, calling them the Black Irish. But who are they really? Were they the descendants of Spanish sailors who washed up after the Armada sank in 1588? The children of Viking raiders who left their mark along the Irish coast? Or does their story go back much further, hidden in the DNA of Ireland's earliest settlers? The truth is stranger than the myths. Modern DNA research, digging deep into the Y chromosome, passed down from fathers, and the mitochondrial DNA from mothers, shows that the Black Irish mystery isn't about one shipwreck or one invasion. It's about thousands of years of survival, population shifts, and genetic quirks that make Ireland one of the most unique genetic landscapes in the world. And here's the real shock. The very same genetic history that gave rise to this mysterious look also explains why Ireland has the world's highest rates of certain traits, from red hair to the ability to digest milk as adults, to diseases like cystic fibrosis. This isn't just a story about hair color. It's about how history lives in our blood, how myths can hide real science, and why identity is never as simple as stereotypes make it out to be. So, let's peel back the layers of history, myth, and DNA to uncover the truth behind the Black Irish. Because once you see how deep these roots go, you'll never look at Ireland the same way again. If you love exploring the hidden stories of our ancestors, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Stone and Bone. That way, you'll never miss the secrets that history tried to bury. For generations, the phrase Black Irish carried a touch of mystery. In old villages along Ireland's west coast, people would say, "Oh, they must be from the Spanish Armada." And it's easy to see why that story stuck. In 1588, the mighty Spanish Armada sailed against England, only to be smashed by storms off the coast of Ireland. Dozens of Spanish ships sank. Survivors staggered onto Irish shores, dark-haired and olive-skinned, so different from the pale locals. Folktales whispered that they fell in love, married into Irish families, and passed down their looks through the centuries. It's a romantic story, but genetics tells another tale. Modern DNA studies show no measurable genetic Spanish signal from that time. The few sailors who did survive couldn't possibly change Ireland's population on a national scale. Then there's the Viking theory. From the 9th to the 11th century, Norse raiders stormed Ireland's coastlines, founded Dublin, and settled in towns like Limerick and Waterford. Surely their DNA left a mark, and yes, it did. About 6% of Irish men today carry Scandinavian Y chromosome lineages, according to genetic surveys from Trinity College Dublin. But that influence is strongest in Eastern Ireland, not in the Western counties, where the Black Irish look is most often reported. And what about the Normans? In the 12th century, Anglo-Norman knights crossed the Irish Sea, conquering castles, marrying into noble families, and leaving their stamp on history. But their genetic footprint is surprisingly shallow. Modern DNA shows their influence is mostly confined to aristocratic lines and small pockets in Eastern Ireland. So, the three most famous theories, Spanish, Viking, Norman, explain part of Ireland's story, but not the whole puzzle. They don't account for why, in places like Kerry, Cork, and Galway, you'll still find families with black hair and light eyes, looking as if they stepped out of another era. That mystery, the one folk stories can't quite explain, pushes us to look deeper. Deeper than castles, shipwrecks, or Viking raids. Into the Bronze Age, when Ireland's entire population was transformed almost overnight. Because if we want to understand who the Black Irish really are, we have to go back 4,000 years, when the DNA of Ireland was rewritten forever. To truly understand the Black Irish, we have to step far back, beyond Spanish sailors, beyond Viking ships, into a time when stone circles rose on Irish hillsides and metal first began to gleam in the hands of ancient tribes. This was the Bronze Age, around 2500 BC, and it brought a shockwave so powerful it reshaped Ireland's DNA forever. Before this time, Ireland was home to Neolithic farmers. Their ancestors had sailed from the Mediterranean thousands of years earlier, bringing crops, livestock, and a new way of life. Genetically, these early farmers carried diverse paternal lineages, Y chromosome groups like I2, G2, and H. They were descended from hunter-gatherers who had survived the Ice Age and farmers who pushed up from southern Europe. But then came the Bell Beaker culture, a mysterious group who spread across Europe with their distinct pottery, advanced metalwork, and, most importantly, their DNA. Archaeologists and geneticists now agree. When the Beaker people arrived in Britain and Ireland, they didn't just blend in. They replaced almost 90% of the existing population in just a few centuries. The evidence comes from Rathlin Island, off Ireland's north coast. There, scientists uncovered the remains of 3 Bronze Age men buried between 2000 and 2500 BC. When their DNA was sequenced, the results were astonishing. All 3 carried the R1 BL21 haplogroup, the same paternal lineage found in over 65% of Irish men today. It was like looking directly at the ancestors of modern Ireland. Even more surprising, they carried the gene for lactase persistence, the ability to digest milk as adults. In most of the ancient world, people lost this ability after childhood. But in Ireland, it became one of the most common genetic traits in the population, reaching the highest global frequency today. In a land where dairy became a staple, this gene was a survival tool. The Beaker newcomers also carried variants for lighter skin and eye pigmentation, traits that spread quickly across Europe. But here's the twist. Even as these lighter traits rose, the genes for dark hair persisted. And in Ireland, those alleles didn't just survive. They flourished in certain communities. Think about that for a moment. The same Bronze Age revolution that turned Ireland into a nation of dairy drinkers and reshaped its population also planted the genetic seeds for 2 extremes: fiery red hair on one side, and the jet black hair of the so-called Black Irish on the other. It was a genetic gamble of history, and Ireland rolled both sides of the dice. So far, we've traced the story through Ireland's fathers, the Y chromosome, passed from man to son like a surname written in blood. But to unlock the full mystery of the Black Irish, we also need to listen to the mothers. Because hidden in mitochondrial DNA, the tiny genetic code passed only from mother to child, is another side of the story. And what it shows is remarkable. The most common maternal lineage in Ireland today is haplogroup H. About 38% of Irish women carry it, especially its subclades H1 and H3. These lineages trace back to Europe's earliest farmers and also to Bronze Age migrants. In other words, Irish mothers have held onto the same DNA for thousands of years, linking modern families directly to prehistoric ancestors. But there's more. Roughly 13% of Irish women carry haplogroup U, one of the oldest maternal lineages in Europe. A branch called U5 is often called the hunter-gatherer signature. It connects modern Irish women to the first people who set foot on the island after the Ice Age, women who hunted, fished, and foraged along Ireland's wild coasts more than 7,000 years ago. Another branch, U4, has roots on the Eurasian steppe and likely arrived with the same Bronze Age migrations that reshaped the male lineages. Other haplogroups, T, K, and J, each tell their own story. T is tied to Neolithic farmers from the Mediterranean. K appears in both early farming groups and later Bronze Age arrivals. J links to ancient migrations out of the Near East. Together, they create a tapestry showing that Irish mothers carried genes from many corners of Europe, yet preserved them in unique Irish combinations. Here's the fascinating part. Many of these maternal lineages are found across Europe, but the specific subclades in Ireland often show the closest matches, not to Britain, but to France, Iberia, and the wider Atlantic coast. That suggests ancient seafaring links, maritime highways of prehistory that carried families, not just warriors, into Ireland long before Vikings or Spanish sailors arrived. And this matters for our mystery, because some of these maternal haplogroups carried pigmentation variants that allowed darker hair to persist, even as lighter traits spread. Combined with the paternal lineages, they created the genetic mix that made the Black Irish look possible. Think of it this way. Ireland's fathers brought in powerful Bronze Age changes. Ireland's mothers preserved the ancient roots. And together, over thousands of years, they wrote a genetic story that could produce such striking contrasts. Red hair and black hair, pale eyes and dark, all within the same nation. And sometimes even within the same family. If you really want to see the Black Irish face, you have to go west. To Kerry, to Cork, to Galway. Lands of stone walls, rugged cliffs, and families who've lived in the same valleys for generations. It's no accident that this region holds the strongest clues. Modern genetics has confirmed what folklore long suspected. The west of Ireland is different. In 2017, the Irish DNA Atlas Project, led by the Royal College of Surgeons and Trinity College Dublin, analyzed people whose grandparents were all from the same regions of Ireland. What they discovered was striking. Instead of one homogeneous population, Ireland broke into 10 distinct genetic clusters. 7 of these represented deeply Gaelic Irish ancestry. The others reflected more recent British influence. And where were the most distinctive, most ancient clusters? The West. Counties like Kerry and Cork showed the closest continuity with the Bronze Age Irish, the very same genetic legacy we saw on Rathlin Island. These Western groups had the lowest levels of Viking and Norman DNA, meaning the later waves of invaders barely touched them. In fact, while most Irish carry around 7% Norwegian-like ancestry from Viking times, the Western clusters often had far less. They remain genetically closer to their Bronze Age ancestors than to their Eastern neighbors. This matters because genetic isolation creates what scientists call founder effects. When a small population is cut off from the outside world, rare traits can survive and even become common. And in the West, those rare pigmentation genes, dark hair combined with pale skin and light eyes, had the perfect environment to persist. But it wasn't just isolation. It was culture too. Western Ireland was long seen as the stronghold of Gaelic tradition, of music, storytelling, and even the Irish language. In many ways, this cultural resilience mirrored genetic resilience. Families intermarried within tight-knit communities, reinforcing old lineages, over generations that shaped not just the culture of the West, but the very faces of the people. So when someone points out the Black Irish look in the West, they're not just noticing hair color. They're seeing the living legacy of isolation, survival, and continuity stretching back thousands of years. And yet, the story doesn't end here. Because as unique as the West is, Ireland as a whole has a secret weapon: the pigmentation genes themselves. Here's where the story takes a surprising twist. Ireland is world famous for red hair. In fact, around 10% of the Irish population has it, the highest percentage of any nation on Earth. But what's less talked about is how, in the same country, families can also carry the exact opposite look: jet black hair paired with pale skin and blue or gray eyes. How can one small island produce such extremes? The answer lies in the pigmentation genes. The biggest player is a gene called MC1R. Variants of MC1R are responsible for red hair. About 8.4% of Irish people carry a version called R151C, which boosts the chance of red hair and freckles. Other variants, R160W and D294H, are also fairly common, and sometimes people inherit more than one. That's why Ireland has such a high concentration of natural redheads. But here's the catch. Just because someone carries a red hair gene doesn't mean they'll have red hair. Pigmentation is controlled by a network of genes that interact like a tug of war between melanin production, which makes hair dark, and mutations that block or weaken that melanin. So someone can carry a red hair gene, but if they also inherit strong dark hair alleles, the black hair will dominate. This genetic push and pull explains how Ireland ended up with two extremes living side by side. Some families produce fiery redheads, while their siblings or cousins may have raven black hair. In fact, geneticists point out that the same MC1R variants that fuel red hair are also common in people who don't look redheaded at all. They simply add to the hidden genetic mix. Even more fascinating, ancient DNA tells us that darker pigmentation alleles have been in Ireland since the Neolithic period. Farmers who arrived from the Mediterranean carried them thousands of years ago. Later, when the Bronze Age population shift introduced lighter skin and eye genes, the two systems clashed, creating Ireland's unique spectrum of looks. That's why the so-called Black Irish phenotype isn't just about one foreign group leaving its mark. It's the product of a genetic balancing act that started over 4,000 years ago and never stopped. So when you see someone with snow-white skin, ocean blue eyes, and jet black hair in Galway or Kerry, you're looking at the outcome of one of the strangest genetic dances in human history. A dance that makes Ireland stand out from the rest of Europe. In Ireland, surnames aren't just names, they're genetic time capsules. They can tell us who held power, where they settled, and even what they may have looked like. Take the Ui Neill dynasty, for example. For centuries, they ruled over large parts of the island, claiming descent from the legendary king, Neill of the Nine Hostages. Genetic studies show that a huge number of men in Northwest Ireland share the same Y chromosome lineage, what scientists call the Northwest Irish modal haplotype, a branch of the R1BL21 haplogroup. Astonishingly, around 20% of men in this region may descend from this dynasty. And where is this cluster strongest? In the West and Northwest, the very regions most associated with the Black Irish look. Another example, the O'Brien surname, tied to the royal descendants of Brian Boru, Ireland's great High King. When researchers tested men with the O'Brien name, they didn't find just one lineage. Instead, they found a patchwork. Some lines tied to ancient Gaelic dynasties, others to Norse settlers, and even a few with English roots. It's proof that even within a single surname, Ireland's history of mixing, invasion, and survival runs deep. This diversity within surnames shows that Irish identity was never monolithic. Families carried multiple genetic stories: hunter-gatherers, farmers, warriors, kings, all woven together over centuries. And yet, the dynastic lineages like the Ui Neill remind us of how power shaped genetics. A ruling family with political dominance could spread its Y-DNA far and wide, leaving a lasting genetic legacy. And in some regions, that legacy overlaps neatly with the Black Irish appearance. It's a reminder that history isn't just written in chronicles and castles, it's written in our bloodlines. Every Irish surname, whether O'Connor, O'Donnell, O'Brien, or Kelly, carries echoes of migrations, invasions, and choices made long ago. Some carry the fiery Redheads mark. Others preserve the dark-haired mystery we call the Black Irish. And sometimes it was tragedy, not kingship, that preserved those traits. Because Ireland's story was shaped not only by dynasties and migrations, but also by devastating bottlenecks that left only a fraction of the population to carry rare genetic traits into the future. Ireland's genetic history wasn't shaped only by kings and migrations. Sometimes it was shaped by tragedy. Throughout Irish history, devastating population bottlenecks, times when numbers collapsed, left lasting marks on the gene pool. The most infamous was the Great Famine of 1845 to 1852, when the potato crop failed. In just a few years, Ireland's population plummeted from about 8 million to 4 million through death and emigration. Entire villages vanished. Families with rare genetic traits either disappeared forever or became the ones to pass them on. This is the harsh math of survival. When half a population is lost, the DNA of those who endure becomes amplified. And in Western Ireland, where isolation already protected certain traits, the famine acted like a genetic filter. Communities that survived carried forward the unusual pigmentation genes that contributed to the Black Irish appearance. But famine wasn't the only force. Ireland also carries unique genetic burdens. mutations that may have once provided survival advantages. One of the most famous is the C282Y allele, linked to hereditary hemochromatosis, sometimes called the Celtic curse. This mutation causes the body to store excess iron. Today, it can be dangerous, leading to liver damage if untreated. But in the past, when diets were poor and iron was scarce, it may have been a life-saving advantage. And where is this mutation most common? Western Ireland, the same stronghold of the Black Irish. Around 1 in 10 people there carry it, the highest frequency in the world. Ancient DNA even shows the allele was present in Bronze Age Irish remains, proving its deep roots. It's another reminder that the same genetic twists that shape appearance can also shape survival. Geneticists often compare this to the sickle cell trait in Africa. Just as carrying one sickle cell gene helps protect against malaria, carrying one hemochromatosis allele may have helped the Irish survive famine and poor diets. In both cases, tragedy and resilience walked hand in hand. So, when we look at the Black Irish today, we're not just seeing a hair color. We're seeing the echoes of survival, of families who endured famine, disease, and hardship, and carried their genetic legacy forward. But survival alone doesn't explain the whole picture. To understand why these traits still exist side by side in modern Ireland, we need to look at the most advanced tools science has today: modern genomics. For centuries, the Black Irish were explained through folklore, shipwrecked Spaniards, wandering Vikings, or secret aristocratic lines. But now, science is giving us answers those old stories couldn't. Modern genomics, using massive DNA datasets and advanced tools like globetrotter analysis, lets us track when and where foreign genes entered Ireland. And the results line up with history, but with fascinating twists. The data shows signals of Viking influence around 1000 AD. About 6% of Irish men carry Y chromosome lineages linked to Scandinavia, mostly R1a subtypes. Unsurprisingly, this shows up strongest in coastal cities the Vikings founded: Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick. Then, around 1170 AD, the genetic record shows the Norman invasion. These signatures appear mostly in Eastern Ireland, and among noble surnames tied to medieval castles. But again, the West remained largely untouched. Another wave appears between 1600 and 1700 AD, connected to the Ulster plantations, when thousands of Scottish and English settlers moved into Northern Ireland. This left a lasting genetic mark in Ulster, but far less in the south and west. So while most of Ireland shows layers of Viking, Norman, and English influence, the western counties stayed remarkably close to their Bronze Age roots. That's why Kerry, Cork, and Galway are still where you're most likely to see the Black Irish look. It's the region least diluted by later arrivals. Even deeper analysis of autosomal DNA, the mixed genetic material we inherit from both parents, reveals the unique balance of Irish ancestry. About 30% comes from Western hunter-gatherers who returned after the Ice Age. Roughly 40% comes from early European farmers who sailed from the Mediterranean. And the final 30% comes from steppe pastoralists, the herders whose arrival triggered the Bronze Age revolution. This three-way mix has been stable for nearly 4,000 years. Few other places in Europe can claim such continuity, and it helps explain the mystery of the Black Irish. Traits from multiple ancient populations, preserved by isolation and shaped by survival, combine to create Ireland's most distinctive faces. But here's the important part. The Black Irish story isn't just about appearance. It's also about health, identity, and heritage. Because the very same genes that shaped Ireland's looks also influence diseases, resilience, and how people see themselves in the world. It's tempting to see the Black Irish as just a quirk of appearance: dark hair, light eyes, pale skin. But when we peel back the layers, it becomes so much more than that. It's about how we tell stories of identity, how myths shape heritage, and how DNA links the past to the present. For centuries, Irish identity was painted with broad strokes: the fiery redhead with freckles, the pale farmer with blue eyes. Those images became stereotypes, charming to some, limiting to others. Yet the Black Irish remind us that Ireland has always been more complex, more diverse, more unexpected than the clichés suggest. Genetics makes this clear. According to studies from Trinity College Dublin and the Royal College of Surgeons, the Irish population isn't a single block, but a mosaic. 10 distinct clusters, each carrying its own echoes of migrations, bottlenecks, and dynasties. That diversity is why you'll find siblings in the same family, one with hair like a flame and another with hair like midnight. And it doesn't stop at appearances. The same population history that produced the Black Irish phenotype also shaped Irish health patterns today. Ireland has the world's highest frequency of cystic fibrosis, unusually high rates of multiple sclerosis, and metabolic disorders tied to genes that were once useful in times of famine. Even the so-called Celtic curse of hemochromatosis is part of this story, proof that survival advantages in the past can become medical challenges in the present. But here's the deeper truth. Behind every face, whether red-haired or black-haired, lies a story of survival. Of Bronze Age migrations, Viking raids, Norman invasions, and famine survivors who carried their DNA through centuries of hardship. To look at an Irish face is to see not just beauty, but history. And that's why the Black Irish matter. They're not a myth from the Armada, nor a footnote of Viking conquest. They are a living reminder that identity is built from thousands of years of change, chance, and resilience. So the next time someone says, "You don't look Irish," remember this. There is no single way to look Irish. The Black Irish prove that heritage is richer, stranger, and far more mysterious than any stereotype. And if uncovering these hidden truths of history fascinates you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Stone and Bone, because there are countless more secrets buried in our DNA, waiting to be told.